Thanks for staying up later. Richard Belzer, the comics comic talk show legend, makes a return appearance tonight. I didn't know this the last time you were on the show, but someone pointed it out to me since then. You were at least part of the inspiration for De Niro crafting the Rupert Pupkin character in King of Comedy?
Well, not really. I mean, we hung out a lot while he was making the picture, and he wanted to get a taste of that world. So one night, Robin Williams brought Robert De Niro, Harry Dean Stanton, Harvey Keitel, a bunch of people into the Comedy Store to see me. And for some reason that night, I dove off the stage. I was like, crazy. And De Niro really kind of took a liking to me, so we started hanging out. And then he came to New York, Catch a Rising Star, and watched me work, and got a taste of the stand-up's world.
Yeah.
And it was fascinating because we were talking about boxing and stand-up and all the analogies, knocking out the audience, punchline, and how a boxer is similar to a stand-up. Because Raging Bull had just come out.
A lot of comics have told me that you were an inspiration for them to let go and not worry so much about the reaction of the audience. I mean, obviously, if the audience doesn't react, eventually you can't sustain your career,
right.
But not to worry about it moment to moment, to just go with whatever they instinctively felt up there.
At the risk of being modest, I'll quote one of my reviews. One time a critic said, "This is the only comedian I've ever seen where the audience leaves wondering if he liked them." And I guess, I've heard other people say that, thanks for doing that, because I'd be in the middle of an act and I'd talk to the audience a lot, and sometimes I would talk to someone, not in a mean-spirited way, but just to address them, and they wouldn't answer me. So sometimes I'd go in the audience and sit with them or stand on their table or get what I wanted. And I guess people thought that, hey, maybe you can do that instead of just standing there memorizing the same jokes every night. And because I worked at Catch from 9 at night till 3 in the morning, and first you start with a full house, then it dwindles and dwindles, and at 2:30 there's 4 guys there, and you still, have to make them laugh, so you come up with all kinds of techniques.
How much of that is a strategy and a technique and just your version of professionalism, and how much of that comes, or at least came in the past, from real anger?
That's a very good question. I was much more, I used to get very angry at the audience when I first started and rush my material, which is what I tell a lot of young comics now. Is what happens is when somebody doesn't get a laugh, they'll blame the audience. It's not the audience's fault. Our job is to make people laugh. So if you don't get a laugh, you go to the next joke, but not with an attitude towards the audience being stupid. But my anger was kind of resentment towards me having to perform, but here I am making this choice, so it was like a philosophical problem. Well, you're here, so it's your job. So it took me a while to direct the anger towards politicians or show business people and integrate it into the act rather than just take it out on the audience all the time.
Did you ever do anything on stage where you look back now and you say, that didn't serve a useful purpose? It wasn't really good for making a valid point. It was just a bad thing to do and it put people off.
There is one thing that haunts me, and if these people are watching, one night I said a line. I used the word Schwarze, which is a Jewish euphemism for a black person, which when I grew up was not a pejorative. It didn't mean like nigger or anything like that. But apparently it has come to be pejorative over the years. And I had a lapse one night, and I called Mr. T a method Schwarze, because he came on my show. It's a whole other story when him and Hulk Hogan almost killed me one night.
Right.
That's another story. But I do this long routine. There's a whole chapter in one of my books about it. And I described him as a method Schwarze, meaning that, and I didn't mean it like he was, I didn't mean it in a racial way, but this black couple was in the audience and they got up and they walked out, and my heart just sank because I've been,
especially given your political stance through the years.
So, if those people are watching, believe me, I don't use that word anymore, even though I don't think of it as a harsh, mean-spirited word. So, that happened once to me,
How do you assess where you stand in your career? Critically and among other comics, you're way up there. But with the public, if they said, hey, name 10 comics, you probably wouldn't be on the list. Have you made your peace with that?
11.5. Well, actually,
if we go to 11, I think you're safe, yeah.
Well, my career has been very, it's not typical. I think of my career as a cumulative thing, not where there's this one thing that's going to happen that'll make me a household word, although homicide may, in fact, do that. I've been a talk show host. I've done film. I've done theater. I've done reviews for the Lampoon. I warmed up Saturday Night Live, did sketches there. Did Letterman many times, The Tonight Show. Had my own show on Cinemax. So, a lot of the people I started with are now major stars and multimillionaires. And honestly, I have to say that there's only very few of them that I resent having made it that far. A lot of the people that I started with, I don't begrudge them their success. They're good friends of mine like Jay and Rich Lewis and David Brenner and people like that, Robert Klein, who I don't begrudge. But then there are some people, don't ask me to name them, who you say, how the hell did that person, you know?
Just people who you think aren't funny.
That get away easy, that are lightweights, that do a kind of generic act, and for some reason the audience buys it. You know, it's a mystery to me.
This is a broad subject. What's the state of comedy now as you see it? Are you able to take the temperature of it?
Well, I'm fascinated right now, Bob, because for 12 years there's been a mentality in America in terms of censorship and culturally what's allowed and how violence has been glorified and repressed sexuality comes out in weird things in films. I think there is a palpable relaxation in America, whatever we think of Clinton. I'm relieved that this 12 years of kind of watchdog on the arts is kind of going to be lightened up. And I think we'll see, it's going to be interesting because for 12 years I had all this great, Reagan wrote my material for 8 years, and I'm almost serious when I say that. I mean, he would do something and I go out on stage and I say, did you, and you know, and just maybe do an impression of him and then say what he did and get laughs. And it's going to be very interesting for people to get a handle on Clinton. I mean, I'm tired of, you know, inhaling and Jennifer, that's been done to death, and that's out of the way. We have to discover, and I say we, I mean political humorists and other comics too, we have to discover what is funny, you know, what's going on now. It's a very interesting time.
Will it be tougher to pull the blade out on this guy?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean,
because culturally he is not diametrically opposed by image the way Bush was, the way Reagan was, the way Nixon was. He's just not as easy to get in your sights.
Well, he's the first president who isn't old enough to be our father. And it's the first time in my life that I have been older than the President of the United States. Yeah. I mean, that's pretty sobering. So it's interesting. I mean, my knife sharpening machines are ready. I mean, I am not going to lighten up on the guy. I mean, my job is to make people laugh, no matter who's president.
What's the actual chilling effect, or what was, on the arts during the Reagan and Bush administrations? It might be perceived that they weren't exactly hospitable to the prevailing point of view in the entertainment community, but in practical fact, what did they stop? What did they inhibit? The NEA is a different thing, because there you're talking about government funds. That's a tiny, tiny fraction of what's out there. How was anybody actually stopped from doing what they wanted to do?
That's an excellent question. If you remember, during the Kennedy administration, he brought artists into the White House, and he had a poet like Clinton did, Reed, and there was an air of civilization and a respect for the arts in the Kennedy White House. In the Reagan and Bush White Houses, their taste was dictated by a more sedate, older, Republican or wealthier. I mean, their taste is not going to be towards what's breaking through in music. You know, the Mapplethorpe, the flap. I remember in the first few years of the Reagan administration, people felt, and I don't know how to verbalize this, but there was just an air of oppression about, and certain colleges were reticent to, and this I heard from some professors, that there was an attack on all the liberal professors in colleges. Certain places didn't get grants. The NEA became much more specific about who got what. I mean, it was subtle, but it was throughout the whole country. It started after 1986, I think, when the Democrats won the Senate and the Iran-Contra story broke. Then the floodgates opened. But for 5 or 6 years, you didn't see a lot of encouragement of innovative art.
But if somebody at the top is perceived to be antagonistic, that can almost act as a catalyst, can't it? I mean, think of the cultural explosion during a period of time when Richard Nixon was the president. Now, granted, it began earlier than that, and it probably had a momentum going. And it's hard to categorize Johnson, who was a liberal but took us into Vietnam, so therefore, to a certain extent, he's in the same category in terms of how our generation felt. So this is hard to put in one cubbyhole or another, but my point is that a lot of this stuff flourished when someone who was perceived to be antagonistic was at the top.
Yeah, that's a good point, but things were already in motion when Nixon became president that could not be stopped no matter who was president. I mean, when Kennedy became president, no matter what we think of Kennedy, and what anybody thinks of Kennedy, there was one thing that he did many things, but one thing he did was instill a sense of dignity in government service and made government an honorable thing. And, you know, the Peace Corps and Vista, and there was something about government that made it honorable. And then after his brains were blown out in the street, and we still don't know who did that, I think the country was just kind of became, they didn't want to invest anymore in who their leaders were that much. So Johnson was one of the most unlovable people in the world. He betrayed us with Vietnam, like you said. And that's why I think people say these crazy kids started rioting, because the world was going crazy. I mean, there was this oppressive atmosphere around. I think Nixon made it worse because of any time there was dissent, it was crushed beyond all reason, you know, like in Kent State and everywhere. So any art came out of that, it was like revolutionary art. Whereas during Reagan, it was just, there was nothing to rebel against because we had been numbed so long. We had been, again, Carter came in with all this promise, and he turned out to be the best ex-president we've had, and not a particularly good president. So I'm just looking forward to, you know, what's going to be the first Clinton joke that doesn't refer to stuff that we were playing around with during the campaign.
You mentioned the thing with Hulk Hogan. The last time you were here, the suit was pending.
Yeah, we couldn't talk about it.
Now, it's been settled.
Yes.
But there was a period of time where Mr. T and Hulk Hogan were kind of doing a shtick together.
Yeah, WrestleMania began.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had the show Hot Properties on Lifetime, and somebody from my staff came in and said, we're going to have on Hulk Hogan and Mr. T. I said, you know, like I was really interested. They said, it would be good for the ratings. We'll let them have them. You know, those are my principles went out the window since I heard that. So they came on, and Hulk Hogan comes into the makeup room and comes over to me. You know how huge this guy is. And he goes, hey, you're a real funny dude. I like you, dude. You and I should do a movie together. You know what I'm saying? You know, this guy's not, you know, there's some humanity there, because I didn't know what to make him. And he was very nice as he could be. And I figured, okay. So then about 10 minutes later, Mr. T's assistant comes in and comes over to me and says, we're walking on eggshells around Mr. T today. He's in a bad mood. I said, wait a minute, this guy makes $3 million a year. If he wasn't on the A-team, he'd be doing 40 years for manslaughter. What do you mean he's in a bad mood? You know, Ethiopia's in a bad mood. What do you mean he's in a bad mood? To myself, I said that. Out loud, I said, okay, we'll be very nice to him. So he comes into the dressing room, and he's got this baton with a spring in the middle of it, and he's got this jumpsuit on.
Yeah, he always carried that, yeah.
And he's doing this, and it's like, you know, it's like this, what genetic experiment went awry? That's what I'm thinking. And he comes in, and I tried to talk to him through his interpreters, but there was just no way, because he was like grunting and grunting. I said, thanks for doing the show. I'm not kidding. This is the way he sounded. Finally, I realized he was saying, where's my dressing room? That's what he was saying. That's all he wanted to know. So I said, back there. So then Hulk Hogan comes back. Where's my man, Mr. T? He's back there. So now I find out that Mr. T's real name is Lawrence Tiro. And Larry Tiro.
Right.
And Bollea is what Hogan's name is, Terry Bollea. So Larry and Terry were in the dressing room waiting to go on. Who knows what they were doing in there. Then they come out on the show, and I'm trying to do my show. You know, I have a bit of an attitude, and I'm being, I guess, combative or whatever. At any rate, to make a long story short, we do this. Hulk Hogan finally says, let's do a demonstration or something, you know. But just let me digress for a second. Before that, I had Mr. T on alone, and Mr. T comes out and he says, all the men in New York are wimps. I said, excuse me? All the men in New York are wimps? Yeah, I was in Central Park today. I beat up 3 muggers. Yeah, okay. And then I used a word that he didn't, I used the word exclaim, or some word he said, I don't know that word. You know, I said, I don't know that word either, but from the street, and I learned it. And the audience went, whoa, you know, and he started pumping the thing, you know, more, and smoke started coming out of his ears. He started channeling Farrakhan. So I went to a commercial. And then Hogan comes out. So there's this tension on the set.
Yeah.
And Hogan comes out and says, I heard what you said to my man, Mr. T. You've been giving him a hard time, just yelling at me. So finally we get out on the floor. I figured this will cool him off, do a little demonstration.
Okay. Now, the first thing you need to know about amateur wrestling or professional wrestling or submission holds, you just tell me, brother, when you want him to quit squealing, okay?
All right.
This is called a front chin lock. How about it, T?
Keep like that for a little while.
He made me unconscious in his arm. And then he let me go. He let me drop to the floor. And I was unconscious, went to the floor, hit the back of my head, blood gushing out. And I had a dream. I was only out for 11 seconds. I had a dream for those 11 seconds. I dreamt I was late for the show, for Hot Properties. And I was really worried. And then I woke up and I see this huge, giant, orange, bleached mustache, stripping, it's Hulk Hogan. You ever see that face on Mars? You know, it's like this huge icon. And he helps me up, and blood's pouring out of the back of my head. And for some reason I said, and now, we'll be right back after this word from you-know-who. We'll be right back. My doctor said, how did you do that? You were in shock. You're losing blood. So I got to show this literally was in my blood. It was on my jacket. It was on the studio floor. And so then what happened after that was I that night I was in the hospital. And I said, well, maybe I'm going to see if this is on the news, you know, just out of curiosity. Channel 2, Richard Belzer, boom. Channel 4, boom, let's run it backwards, slow motion. Channel 5, Channel 7, everything. It was like I got 10 more stitches watching the damn thing. And then that night I had a dream. I had another dream. Yeah, this one was 12 seconds. No, I had another dream that night that my first show back would be, because my head was all split open. I thought I'd have like brain damage. And anyway, we sued him. He settled out of court just before we were going to go to court. And now I have a lovely home in France called the Hulk Hogan Arms.
So it's a significant settlement?
It's all gone, but it was significant.
We're back with Richard Belzer. Now, during the first segment, you mentioned Homicide.
Mm-hmm.
This is the new NBC show. They stuck it on after the Super Bowl, so obviously they want to give it a big pitch. And there's another link, come to think of it, that you have with Mr. T. Because it suddenly occurs to me that they put the A-Team on after the Super Bowl, because I remember this, they made me interview Mr. T in the stands in the pregame show. It was in January of '83. The Dolphins played the Redskins, and he was hostile to my suggestion that he should. I think I asked him if he ever planned to junk the Angry Young Man act and slip into a nice three-piece suit and a pair of Tom McCanns, and he failed to see the humor in the suggestion. But nonetheless, this post-Super Bowl slot gave the A-Team a big boost. That and, of course, the artistic quality of the program itself.
Well, yeah, the writing.
Yeah, and so now you're in this Barry Levinson deal, Homicide.
Right. I tell you, this is the most incredible experience I've ever had, because first of all, for Levinson to do television, everyone's like, we've had more press attention on this show because his decision to do this story based on this book, Homicide, by David Simon. This reporter from the Baltimore Sun hung out with the Baltimore homicide police for a year and wrote this book. And Barry felt that it couldn't be a 2-hour movie because there's just these ongoing stories. He thought television is the long form for this particular stories. And all the characters in the show are based on composites of real people. And the show is all handheld camera. It has a sense of immediacy to it. It's kind of a cross between MASH and Cops and document. I mean, it's really incredible the way the camera becomes like one of the actors. The cameras aren't on any, they're not on its slats or anything. It's always there. And we had the Baltimore police on the set all the time. So everything we do is by the book. How to touch a body, how to open a door, everything. How to handle our weapons, and it's been fascinating. I have new respect for the police, by the way.
Your guy is a detective, right?
Detective John Munch, Homicide.
Who's he patterned after?
He's patterned after, he's a composite of a couple of people, but the character description is mental case, hair trigger temper. It's very, very funny, but very dark and cynical. And
How could they ever...
Belzer with a badge.
How could they ever have decided upon you, then, for this role? It goes against type to such an extent.
I'll confess. Would that satisfy you? I did it, okay? It's over. I confess. I had a blackout. Now it comes back to me. I was driving in my car. I killed Jenny Good. My tires hydroplaned over her. Case closed. I did it. Cancel the knock, I'm going to the gas chamber.
Oh, you think we can get the death penalty?
Like a death penalty being with you every time you smoke in the car with the windows closed. You're not going to smoke now, are you, while we're eating?
You still got its little cover on.
So you practice safe smoking, is that it? Well, it's funny because Barry called me up. Somebody before Barry called me, and he said, I just thought about you when I read the character description. I just thought, and I said, wait a minute, you thought to myself, and you thought about me? Every actor in town wanted to get a meeting with Barry for this series. And he called me, and I read with him, and he was relieved that I could act. And I could see that, oh, good, you know, like you can act, because we hit it off.
Yeah.
And then I came back the next day, and the rest is history.
And now, also this month, there's a movie coming out that you're in with Bill Murray and Robert De Niro, right?
Right. Not to drop any names, but...
And two good names. But this one goes against type, because isn't De Niro kind of like the nerdy, goofy guy in this thing, and Murray is more in the direction that you'd expect De Niro to be cast?
Yeah, it was interesting that Bob and Bill decided that Bob would be the nerdy cop and Bill would be the mobster, the gangster. As a matter of fact, Billy beats Bobby up in the movie, like, viciously. But De Niro also has a love scene in this. For the first time, he's had like a real kind of romantic... If you think about it, Bobby's never really had great romantic scenes. So it's an interesting movie because to see Bill Murray as a gangster and to see how that take on it, and to see Bobby as the kind of like shy, nerdy cop, it's really interesting. The script was really good. And you play? I had to do a lot of rehearsing and research. I play a stand-up comic. Ah. So, man, I was like, you know, I had to go to Stanislavski exercises, and I have a very lovely cameo in the picture.
Though it may come as a shock to some of you, these programs are on tape. And moments after Richard Belzer left, we discovered that only the ending of the show was screwed up by technical difficulties. So in the absence of Richard Belzer, who is now on the Santa Monica Freeway, thank you for watching, and see you later.
Now, the other day, I got pulled over in Beverly Hills. I said, "What is it, officer?" He said, "Your left speaker's off."